More insight on the story, we now welcome Sigurd Neubauer, an expert on the Gulf Cooperation Council, and he joins us from Washington. Thank you so much for your time on this day. A dramatic development in recent hours. Break down for us the significance of this agreement to end the blockade on Qatar. Why now?
Absolutely. What we're seeing now is the fruition of really 3 years of intensive American diplomacy. We know that, just for the benefit of your viewers, that President Trump initially sided with the Saudis when the blockade was imposed, and that decision at the time was understood that the president, who was surrounded by non-experts and outsiders, had been swayed by the Saudis to wage on their side. But as quickly as the president was informed by his Secretary of State and Defense, the United States began to call for a dialogue between the Gulf parties, because all of them are important U.S. partners. And so from that point on, the United States has really consistently tried to resolve this crisis. And it is now that the administration is departing that the Saudis and the Qataris have now reached difficult compromises in order to finally resolve this crisis.
Now, talk to us a little bit more about that U.S. involvement. Of course, we know that Washington has been brokering several normalization deals in recent months with Israel. So talk us through the Washington role here in terms of the benefits for America. As you say, the Trump administration is winding down. How does the U.S. benefit from these latest developments?
Well, it is important to understand that the crisis, when it erupted, was based on false premises, and it was, for all practical purposes, a manufactured crisis. It was a crisis that was engineered to lure an inexperienced administration into a conflict that was needed. But because the Trump administration, as you know, has sought to normalize relations between the Gulf states and Israel as part of a strategic objective to isolate Iran in the region, this crisis has just been a huge headache and a distraction. So what they instead tried to do was to find face-saving mechanisms for all parties involved so that this crisis could be resolved. And this is where we are now, where we have seen, of course, that the United States, and by Jared Kushner, for him in particular, I think that this crisis was something that has really been a personal issue for him. He has tried so hard to isolate Iran, and we are seeing that as the Biden administration comes in, Saudi Arabia has a big incentive to kind of start out with a new slate with the incoming administration, as opposed to have a conflict linger in.
And of course, the blockading countries include those with normalization deals with Israel. Does this move in any way signal some kind of potential softening of the stance of Qatar when it comes to securing some kind of deal down the line with Jerusalem? Your thoughts?
Well, I think we need to be very clear about this, and that is that the relationship between Qatar and Israel is very good and very strong. The Israelis, just like the rest of the international community, has wanted to see this crisis end. And so everybody is happy that this crisis is ending. The strategic shift between the Gulf states and Israel has already been cemented, and I think it's only a matter of time before that process moves forward with the other Gulf states. But first and foremost, what the Americans wanted, and we're seeing that being actualized now, was to break the peace amongst its own Arab partners.
Well, thank you so much for your insight. No doubt there are fascinating times ahead in this region. Sigurd Neubauer, an expert on the Gulf Cooperation Council, thank you for your time live from Washington.